go ahead and DCA in the best and easiest way with crypto by rounding up the change that you use on your. They also got tons of other features. The ones I like to use are the ones that let me know about alerts about coins. Super helpful when you want to grab that dip. Now let's go ahead and get this show. And thank you, Roundly X, for sponsoring us at roundlyx.com. Dang, that is the intro. It's so awesome. Thank you again, roundlyx.com, for helping us out with that and getting things set up. Now, today I wanted to do a deep dive into Ripple to kind of break up some of the hashes stuff that we're going to be talking about. And what up, Mr. Paul McNeil? Glad to see you coming. So with Ripple, a controversial currency that's been around for a long time, but that's going to be in its own unique way what it is. So what we're going to do today, we jump into each page. We got this little keyword that will pop up for us. Now, I just wanted to give everybody basically a heads up. I do own Ripple. This is my public wallet. As you see, I don't have a whole lot in my public wallet, but this is a few months ago. So the whole point of that is just letting you know, I'm not a stranger to Ripple in any form. But really, whom is Ripple? Really need to talk about, like, Ripple being the original name of the currency for XRP, but it's also the name of company that runs XRP, the currency. Also XRPL, the XRP LCA, the XRP LF. So a lot of very I don't know, a lot of numbers and lower letters, but it's actually not that bad. So basically, the ideal of Ripple was actually invented a long time ago, but it turned into Ripple in 2012 by Chris Larson, and you can see here now he's the executive chairman at Ripple now. Also Jed McCaleb, former owner of the Mt. Gox, and also Stellar, and then also author Bitto. So these are three people wanted to do something really nice. And originally, Ripple was actually called Open Coin, and the XRPL was actually called something else before that. Like, for example, now we have like Ripple Pay and a few other things. But at one point in time, it was something completely different. Now, I'm not going to talk about is it a security or not. That's not what we're going to be here for. I just wanted to show you guys here, basically, if you go to this website here at the QR on the top, oh, right behind the B, move that over. But basically, what they're trying to do is they're trying to solve. So transmission of data is a very important thing. As you can see here, they use XRapid and XCurrent and X. Actually, I think have a couple other ones on top of that nowadays. This is a bit old. And the key ones here is current and XRapid. Those are two things that I think the most use out of the Ripple net. And if you go to this website, you'll see additional things they have for Ripple. That's kind of, but when you really want to know more about what's going on, you might need to actually just visit their content library. They actually have a white paper. Now I show you guys this. To get the white paper, you basically have to KYC, and as you can see, you can put it in almost anything here. So I'll give you the direct link to that, but you don't actually have to KYC your real. And as soon as you do all this, you click the button, they give you link to an actual web page. As you can see, I was actually through it. Now that's going to be a direct link right there to that web page for you. We can see this is done by Oliver One, another person that works with Ripple, thing, also Ripple Research. And if you go through this entire thing, this is for Ripple, not the current XRP, but the company and things that they're wanting to do. Mr. Crypto Curator, I do hope this is going to be an interesting just as much as you. Um, so if we go through here, you're going to actually learn a lot about previous crypto markets and stuff like that. Now they do here and they try to define digital assets. Nowadays we do have more crypto assets than just fungible and fungible, but that's a little bit more convoluted and somewhat kind of put to the same categories. Like for example, there is something called fungible non-fungible tokens, and there are non-fungible fungible tokens, which in very basically the same of the two, but just combined in a different way. Um, but going through here, they have really good information about like what is the cost to get started, and a lot of this is going to be towards high-end big companies, tons of data or wealth or something going through their systems, and that's something to take really big into account too when you're reading this. This is for the top end clients. And there's nothing wrong with what the page is directed at. So when you're reading through it, that's what you got to remember the whole way through, because it's basically a marketing tactic. This entire white paper is just a marketing system. And it is what it is, but that is for the company. And I wanted to point this out because we really have to talk differently about the company versus the currency or the ledger or any of the other systems involved with it. So now it might be a good idea to actually start talking about XRP itself. I'm going to just drop that down for us again. Um, you're saying this is the utility for the global economy. Um, and their key points here is it's fast, very fast, and running off a server system, so it's a little bit more lightweight than maybe proof of work. You can see here they can settle transactions within 3 to 5 seconds. Now, there are other blockchains that are way faster. We have quarter of a second and half a second blockchains, but um, the way XRP and the ledgers and everything, all the systems it works with, does compare to the others, where the others are just based stake with no extra stuff built on top of it. It's just as simple as it can be, which makes them that fast. So they have all their reasons here to use both Ripple and the Ripple XRPL. Um, so if we continue down to the bottom of this page, we can actually see they have more information here about the ledger itself. And even these two things are considered two different entities. And to be honest, when XRP was first came into a currency, they were trying to do this kind of quickly. Like this was a very main to separate in the very beginning of its lifespan. So with centralized and centralized currencies, the ledger though is a part of the cryptocurrency. So it is kind of strange that they have that separated and call themselves a cryptocurrency. But with XRP and the ledger not being a part of each other, but XRP is the native token on the ledger. So that's also important to know. It is not the only one, but it is the, so if you're using Ethereum, that's the native for the and just a good distinction to keep in mind. Ripple has reasons to make these distinctions separate a little bit later. So stay in because you're going to want to see. So what we want to look at right now, I want to look at the registry. This is not something I do all the time. When we're looking at currencies, but this was a major company holds this cryptocurrency, and this is when you look at that company when they're majority holder. And so we can see here, we can actually see they basically there's success stories, there's rally stories, there's a bunch of stories behind them, both positive and negative. And in this site, they're only going to list you the positive, thankfully. So you can see the actual technicals of the business. Now, the important part here that we want to look at is these are the three people who represent the rights of this company. Job, Crow, I'm sure I'm saying these names wrong. I apologize. And White C. Ryan. These are the three people responsible for this. The XRPFL, which is who technically runs the XRP ledger. That's XRP ledger trust. And I just wanted to show you that because we're going to look at these specifically because they take a lot of the credit for what we call Ripple and the XRPL. I just want to basically show you when it started. And the XRP Ledger Foundation, XRPLF, is what we're looking at in this case. And it did actually like the September 24, 2020. So this foundation is technically fairly new. So we'll probably haven't seen as much it can bring out or expand on or do with or anything else. When you're looking at all this and you're going, oh, well, this is a newer foundation. Yes, it is. And this was founded around the same time that a lot of other crypto chains doing foundations very rapidly. So it became like a commonality to see in the crypto space. And I think there's nothing wrong. So let's actually look into some of individuals. Now we got Mr. White Sea Wind right here. He was the third person, I believe, on that list, and we can see he definitely does do some of the coding for XRPL, specifically the legend. When you go through, you can see that basically December 2018 was the first he did anything with Ripple. Did the XRP tip bot, which is how I've received my Ripple. I've actually used the Ripple tip bot. That's the only way I've ever received my Ripple. So thank you, White Sea, for doing this. But if we go back into his past, what we end up seeing is that he was working on mostly internet protocols and systems. So maybe that's why he got into the XRPL, because it's a protocol and system compared to like front end or anything else. He's a back end from what it really seems. And he's their lead tech on the XRPL. This guy right here, Mr. Christian Jarv, one of the other people responsible for the XRPLF. Getting all my notes in order while I go through here. And this is basically, this is the other company he works for, Grant Thornton Baltic, and that will make sense here in a minute. But as we see, he is basically a person that can run the numbers. He's a tax service person. He can probably do the business side of things, and probably why he's in the foundation. Then we have this guy, which is, I think, in everything I researched, noted for creating the XRPLF, or maybe even wanting to create it. I'm not entirely too sure on that. It is a little bit convoluted there. And fighting his information way more difficult than it should have on LinkedIn, which I don't have access to. But if we go to this website right here, if you go to LinkedIn, you find out he owns another company called Titanium UA or Titanium something. And if we go in here and we just do a quick search for Titanium, we can see, yeah, Titanium OU, a venture capitalist firm in Eastern Europe. And so that's what he does ahead of time. So now you know who is in charge of the foundation. So you can see they got three people that really had an idea of what's on their shoulders for work. And we can see here are the actual people. So we can see a couple of them right here. And if you go through here, it does actually list those three people as the board management. And that's a kind of a good distinction there, because those are the three people that are probably going to change the least over the years. And when you're talking about the XRPLF. And the only reason why I want to talk about the XRPLF is, again, they're most notable for responsible in the future from their start for the XRPL, the ledger itself. And for being one of the few currencies that actually has that distinction of who's technically responsible for that ledger, that's a big move that is dramatically different than any other cryptocurrency, or in general, most currencies. Now, when you go into the banking system, it's not as unusual there. Here we go. So I wanted to talk again because I mean, like, we have to really talk about why is there a separation of XRP itself and Ripple itself? Because, like I said, at one point in time, they were the same. You know, Ripple was XRP, and XRP was just the handle, but also Ripple was the company. Even back still also the company. We've seen other cryptocurrencies do that early stages of the cryptocurrency life. The the separation really was for 2 points: legal and perception. And this is even before the SEC lawsuit that these distinctions started happening. So I don't want to say that it's because of the SEC lawsuit because it's actually not. I'll show you reasons why here real quickly. So this is the simplest way to put it though. Um, when someone says something like Ripple just created new software, you don't really want them to think that a cryptocurrency just created new software. I think that's probably the best perception reason to separate two things. And there's nothing wrong with that. We've seen Library and Odyssey, you know, they got Odyssey now and separate the Library coin from the Library, you know, overhead system. Um, so we are seeing others do the same thing. The most notable point that I can think of the why this is in 2018 there are at least 100 banks. Now you find out the information here in 2018 there was at least 100 banks to use X, and that's a very distinct reason to have operation because X current is something that runs on the XRPL that uh, coincide users of directly with XRP. XRP might be used in some fashion for something within it, but it is distinctively not using, it's considered not using XR currency, just the XRPL. And so in the separation for the perception, that's also really important. And legally, that's also important because now banks don't feel like they are relying on a cryptocurrency, like they're relying on a service on a network that just happens to have a cryptocurrency attached. That's kind of important for them. Um, if we go into the actual wiki, you can see um, in 2005, the what we call the XRPL was actually started as providing a secure payment option for members on a global network. So they were actually working on this concept way before it actually what we know it as today. And again, it was open coin before it was Ripple, which there are some places still runs and some places open coin doesn't still run. But the biggest point here is they were trying to Swift. And that is the whole ideal of X current specifically is to allow a replacement of Swift. And that is what their utility is. Um, if you go through here, you see that's pretty much all they tell is the beginning stages of everything. We're not going to go into the SEC. um, but keep on, if we keep on trucking, we can actually see um, there have been complications within this SEC lawsuit that everyone, even the people here, are actually talking. So we can actually see on this site, one of the people's in the that SEC lawsuit did kind of come out with some information I think somewhat important to look at. And it actually says that, oh, where's it at? It's like right here. Purchasing XRP is an investment and is not an investment in Ripple. There is no common enterprise between Ripple and XRP purchasers. There were comments that Ripple would help generate profits for XRP holders, and the XRP ledger is decentralized. But also in here, he does mention that he bought it during the initial offering, and I think that's kind of important because they've talked about this for. I remember when the website Ripple website had changed, and it went from we created Ripple to we purchased Ripple. And in the eyes of many, that's important. Whether you like it or you don't like it, it is what it is. The people who created it, also the people who created the Ripple Labs and Ripple, they also, the people who now own Ripple and majority said they bought it from themselves. That's a weird confusion, and it's something that is a commonality amongst Ripple, the company. Um, and I do want to point that out is, when we go real talk, Ripple does this convolution with words, the company, all the time. As you can see here, trust on the XRP ledger, which is something you're not supposed to have in a cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrencies are supposed to remove. This isn't the only cryptocurrency with trust or centralized systems. Like, for example, Binance Smart Chain is in a full authority chain. They've admitted it publicly. They don't care. That is what it is. And they even have to restart their chain every 24 to 72 hours of the way it's set up as an authority, a full authority chain. But what I like really about this Ripple talk from 5 years ago is they actually give about how Ripple uses credit system on the ledger, not just Ripple itself. And this person right here kind of gives that the best. He really explains the best that how they have both trust and credit on this system. So if you want to come check that out later, it is actually a pretty decent read. And if you look, this guy's actually a big XRP fan. And so this is also written through those eyes. But he gives a lot of actual information about people who might be using it, people who want to use it, people who are using it. And it's a short read, but there's more in his blog for everyone to check out. And blah, blah, blah. So we want to go into like these trust lines. So let me do this right here. Now, this is one of the official XRPL websites. So having these trust lines, it's used in two different forms. The first way it's used is to describe basically a portion of the consensus of who to actually trust. And that's something we will show when we go into the talk about the consensus. We can see that it is invented with the word trust specifically being used to get people to have trust in it. But not just that, but trust in the people that are a part of the trust lines. And then if we keep going through here, we actually see they have, it is an authorized, there is authorized trust lines, unauthorized trust lines. They can do quite a few different things with this setup. People who are authorized trust lines, you can see they have stable coins that can be issued, or they can be issued to the chain or ledger, I should say, my bad. But we can also have, you can do NFTs. There are some scary things about the trust lines. It's the fact that they have control over the XRP in similar fashion to how stablecoins have control over stablecoins. It's like stablecoin companies can actually prevent transferring in or out stablecoins of a wallet, and XRP can be done in the same way. But it's important fact here is in this case they're going to be freezing like system specific running on a trust line. And they even point out here, no one can actually freeze the XRP in the XRP ledger, but at the same time, they're saying what they can do is they can freeze people who are relying specifically on the trust lines. And even as like you can only give up the ability to freeze individual counterparties. So the way this works is when you're doing stuff with Ripple, there has to be an agreement. And until that agreement is completely solved, or it is set up with a no freeze agreement, these funds can be frozen. That's both scary, and for big companies that might be beneficial, which is again why they're looking at banks, why they're looking at big institutions, finance institutions, like all these different things. So basically, big financials come in, create a trust line, and then anybody who works with them on the XRP ledger, they have the ability to freeze these tokens as need be for things like, hey, you're not making your payments in, we're not making our payments out. And that's the important distinction here, because you're going to hear people talk about freezing of tokens, and they do explain it here of what they mean. But they have this right here, which is where everyone, I think a lot of people are really scared about, is that there are rules to where the ledger can be frozen. And a global freeze isn't exactly just freezing the ledger, but it is one of the features available through it. If you go through all the big links here, you can actually learn more about that. But at the same time, they can, on your trust line, you can freeze tokens that are connected to your trust line that are like, you issue tokens on your trust line that goes another trust line that's connected to your trust line. You still have the ability to freeze those tokens. So even if it's not directly on your trust line anymore, but it was oriented from your trust line, you still have that ability to freeze. And that's really what global freeze is thinking about. So what is the reason for a health line or a trust line? Health. You can see here they actually have a healthcare section of XRP. One of the reasons they want to use it, and this really is about the XRPL. Um, and you hear they do have PayNet, so there is a way to actually use Ripple with this system specifically. But when you go into the white paper and the project and you look at what they're talking about, not only are they wanting to try a way to have a payment solution for healthcare and stuff like that, but they're wanting a way to transfer your health records efficiently and fast. And that's a really good thing to point out, because there are other comp chains and things trying to do the same thing, but I think XRP probably does that the best in this case. Out of all the ones I've looked at specifically about healthcare, XRP's what information they give you here through the white paper, the roadmap, other documents, they probably have the best setup for this. But this does also show that the term trust line is used as like a high perspective capital. And if you don't know what that means that in the perspective of other people, it has value in it. And that is kind of cool. Like, you're actually putting the word trust line used in 3 different formations for and two of them are completely active and allows them to have wealth or value within that concept of a system. Not just like, like the XRPL has value in it, the consensus model has value in it, have actual value in just the name alone. That's kind of cool, I guess. And I say kind of cool because, like, we see that a lot in marketing, but we don't cryptocurrency. So we're gonna go. Okay, let's look at the analysis of the protocol and get into the nitty gritty. I'm gonna spend a good portion of time in the protocol because where my fun stuff for me happens. And we can see here they even call to Ethereum. They talk about how mining can be expensive and things like that. They do talk about benzite faults, which they have a good reason to talk about that, and we'll get in that very quickly. But there are 3 major components to their protocol on the XRPL. And this site explains it pretty simply. Deliberation, where you are setting it up, you're getting everything set up for the transaction, for verifications. You're choosing which proposals will be done from other nodes or tons of other things. And it does consider the transactions based on specific rules and how to apply them. And in some cases, you can even adjust these rules depending on what you are doing, if you're a trust line, not a trust line, and other various factors. So then you have validation, where the nodes have to actually check the ledger and make sure it meets these rules and make sure it meets the rules that the transactors are trying to agree to, because 2 transaction may not be wanting to agree on the same rules, so that you got to check that. And then you got to make sure that it also meets rules to the protocol itself. You want these trusted nodes take turns in confirming data and information, and that support of this transaction is at least 80% of the nodes, and that's within a node cluster. So a preferred branch, like you got to then figure out how you're gonna transfer, basically, right? And not just transfer, but I think this also considers the end part of the validation, because you can see their validation is a multi-step process, and I believe that this is the last point of the process if you even have to use this point. Um, and there are other proof of stake systems that do multi-step validation. This isn't the only one, and they wanted to make sure they point that out here, because some of the extremely fast cryptocurrencies use multi-step validation, or even forked validation, where there's like different validations that you can do based on what transaction type you want to do. So uh, here I have basically the gate hub, which is a big communicator on XRPL, and they kind of go into the differences here. But the big one that I want to look at is this image, which for these types of images, but they kind of, I don't know, I just feel like this explains quite a bit of what's actually going on. We can see there is a history of a ledger. There's the most recent validation. We can see that they actually discard old and also bad or incorrect or non-validatable um, ledgers, like not just transactions, but old ledgers. So in this case, each ledger is kind of rewritten in some cases, not always, but it can be in some cases completely rewritten as quickly as possible by each basic block being a form of ledger itself. And so that's kind of important here. Each block is a form of ledger. And that's how do this discardation and rewrite, because they would get rid of a single block versus the entire chain. And that's also, I think, why they don't chain ever in the terminology here. They do to how chain systems work or chain databases, but they want to make distinct use of the term ledger, and there are reasons for that. Um, so we can see that if it has the same index but a new unique hash, that they are all a part of the next potentially block or the next potential ledger note. So they might have different transactions, rule sets, blah, 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 state sets, different. And then we can see here the proposed transactions for these could be separately different or the same. And this is okay. These are the candidates for the next ledger. And that's really an important thing there. And that's the best thing we get out of this entire page because it's very clear. And they actually explain it throughout this page too. I think there's a video linked. Yep, there's a video linked where they kind of talk about use cases for it and stuff like that. Perfectly cool for you to learn more with. Let me put that QR back up there one more time. I'm gonna find a better way to do these QRs. I'm looking. Um, so those are the main points. But now I'm gonna get my notes back in order. So before I go deep into this system, there is a very general distinction thing I want to point out, because two questions were asked, or one question was asked, and multiple answers were given. Um, but basically, it was just, you know, um, will the ledger continue if out? And we see what we're really getting from here is this bit of information right here, xrpl.org consensus.html, which I believe that's the very next slide. Yes, it is. Um, this site given by that guy is where, Ledger kind of gives more information about each individual thing within the ledger, in the consensus model. And we see that original image here, but as you can see, I don't know, I think it's a little bit more difficult to read here compared to the other site. Um, and then they have some more here where they are actually explaining where stuff moves into the ledger and do a very robust visual for you to look at, in order to understand the back end, the code, what's actually going on. And just so you know, like the ledgers are not actually pieces of paper, but that's a good way to try to explain it people, especially if you're in a business world, that piece of paper method, it really does play off. Here we go. Sorry, my thing's just getting a little jumpy on me. But we can see here they have two different sets of systems in their nodes. So they have validators themselves and they have trackers. And we can see it's specifically called a server, just like Ethereum now calls their stuff servers, because that's technically what they are. Even if validator is technically a server. Now you can see that there's two different methods or two different ways that data talks to amongst these things. So tracking servers have the decentralized server system within themselves for sharing data. But oh my bad, validators. I said that wrong. Validators have the decentralized system for sharing data, but the tracking servers do not, and that's really important here. And because when you're a validator, they're saying that you have basically this trust to not collude, which again, you're not supposed to have trust in a blockchain system. While the tracking servers are only one way, they are saying, hey, I'm not going to collude with you, while the validators have to agree not to collude with each other, technically, according to their data that they give. And if you look at this, basically what that means is if you're not a validator, you're not actually a part of any distributed system. You see this pattern here? This is what we call a distributed system. And if you go into networks, you'll see this is what they call a centralized network. A decentralized distributed network is like Bitcoin, things like that, where it's both of these things together. And the differences there is a decentralized distributed means that you can access this internal system, so the validator part, whenever you want, versus just a distributed system, you cannot. So if you're not a part of the validator network, you're this guy out here on the outer lines trying to talk to the validators to give them information, but you can also read what's going on. So you might get information bits and bytes throughout the consensus. And if we look right here, there are rounds to consensus. So validators, they propose a set of transactions. They talk amongst themselves to figure out which ones are going to be used, and then they talk to each other to see who all agreed to what. That's the best way and easiest way to put that. And then if we go in here, we can kind of see here's the transactions. It gets put into a ledger, and then the hash of the ledger. This is the only time cryptographic is used. The system, it's used with the ledger, and I wanted this to be pointed out because when we talk about cryptocurrency, normally currency has some form of cryptographic proof using, while here it's only the ledger that does cryptographic proofing of any kind. And there are other proof of stake coins that have cryptographic proof tokens, but those are considered tokens even if they're native, which is a bit strange. So we see after the validation stuff goes through, they're basically talking with each other about what hash they obtained. And something we'll find out here in a bit is if you have two competing hashes, yeah, if someone has a different hash, the other node, then you actually have to recalculate or download everyone else's ledger hash. That is a bit different because, like, in decentralized cryptocurrencies, you don't want to get rid of incorrect data. You don't want it being removed because that, with that in there, it creates a historical order of attack. And there's not supposed to have trust in these systems, which is the whole point of them existing. So re-downloading is a form of censorship. If you recalculate your hash and you come out good, you're good. But in the consensus algorithm, there is a set number of times you can do that before you are told you have to re-download, or we're not going to be talking to you later. You're going to lose your validation line of trust or your validation abilities. So Even if an improper, illegal, or unblocked transactions are not allowed on the chain or ledger, then that is a type of censorship. Because censorship doesn't have to completely remove stuff. It, it's like, for example, if you're on a platform and your searches or people searching for you are removed, so they can't actually search for you. But if they have a link directly to you, that is a search ban, which is a form of censorship, but you still exist platform. So in this case, this is a form of censorship, not overall censorship. And that you got to point that out as a distinctive, because some people, when you say censorship, they think, oh, it means this is not allowed anywhere. Um, oh, yeah, I might not have posted that up. Um, but in reality, this is talking about specifically um, just the one miscalculated. As you can see, all the other ones have a specific hash. This one has unspecific hash. And it's saying if it's fewer than 80% of all of these validator nodes, the validator nodes, then that's when that is being forced upon or told that you have to rehash or download. And then there was just a point pointed out that all the links these are in the note. You look on YouTube, go into the description. There should all the notes or all the links should be there. That or it's in the comments. Take a peek, take a gander, and comment what you think about today's episode while you're there. So they have key takeaways and stuff. I'm gonna go into that because we have more to looking about the consensus model. So I will pull up this image. It's it's just a screenshot, but it says a curated default UNL is provided to all users, which is chosen to minimize a specific set in the algorithm described in section 3.2. While users can and should select their own UNLs, the default list of nodes guarantees that even naive users will participate in a consensus process that achieves correctness and agreement with extremely high probability. Um, what this really means is two things. This points out that they do have agreement issues on this chain, which they do. I'm not going to lie. Almost all proof of stake systems have some form of agreement issues. But what this also says is that a curated list is sent out that you are to look at. And there are other points to this, like, for example, what is a UNL, a unique node list? Each server maintains a list, which is a set of other servers that queries when determining only the votes of other members of its UNL are considered when determining consensus, as opposed to every node on the network. So a decentralized network would do every node on the network. That ensures that you're decentralized. But because they have problems with agreements, they had to reduce that scope. And that's what that means. Reduce your scope to other ones that you already know you can trust. Thus, the UNL represents a subset of network within it that is collectively considered. Um, and that just means that they're saying that you're not going to collude. Um, and that does not require that each individual member of the UNL can be, which, again, if 80% of your UNL different, they're being forced to take different actions, not you. So, and a point also to point out here is if in the 80% you choose not to rehash, or you rehash more than times in your and you don't download the hash from everybody else, you can be booted from a UNL, and you will not appear on the curated UNL that gets sent out to everybody. So proposal is basically any server that can broadcast transactions to be included into the consensus process, and every server attempts to include every valid transaction when a new consensus round starts. So if you are putting a proposal in the second half of the consensus, it's not gonna make it into that set of consensus. It'll only make it into the next set of rounds. That's an important distinction here, because having a top and bottom round set does mean that there can be confusion there. And during the consensus process, however, only proposals from servers on the UNL are considered. Keep that in mind. However, only servers on your UNL are considered, and we saw here earlier, that's basically what it says, you stuff from your UNL. That's your trust network, not your trust line, but your trust network, as they say it in their thing. So we're going to go into the original consensus algorithm. This one actually isn't the original paper. When you see here, there is an updated version, but this is where those screenshots just came from. And I used to have every version of this white paper at one point in time, and then in 2018, I had some issues and lost some data. But this is the one from the beginning of 2018, and they have a lot of defining terms, and you see here, here's the UNL, the proposal. But when we're going through here, something that they talk about is that there is a Benzine, and there's a certain point where the Benzine systems just that algorithm just doesn't quite do its job. It doesn't work. There's not always going to be an agreement or something else. And you can see here, here's a really good example of what UNLs look like. They're considered cliques or groups or clusters. So these little dots over here is a UNL. This is a bigger network of UNLs, and then these two UNL networks to each other. And I am trying to explain this as simply as possible because mathematical formation of only thing that involves this consensus model. You can see here they even say like probability of like getting everything taken care of, or probability of and this having a consensus cartel. And the bigger the UNL size, the more probability you really have in that case. So that's the ideal of having a cluster, is to remove the ability of having collusion amongst clusters. If we go through here to simulate the code, and I wanted to point out that a lot of this is done through simulated code. And there is even a way to do simulated code to see if your transaction will make it into the next block. But I wanted to show you this because it does have this graph image that are really explanatory. UNL, yeah, talking about one of these little things when we're saying that your UNL is connected to other UNLs they're talking about. So imagine each one of these dots is UNL, and they're all with each other. But again, we also know that's only if you're a type of, if you're a validator within the network. So here's the updated version. From my understanding, this is the most updated version that I was able to actually find. Updated February 20th of 2018. And if we go to the original one that I was just looking at, we see David Schwartz, Noah Young, and Arthur Bowe is noted as the writers, while when we go over here, it is now only Brad Chase and Ethan McBro. But what that really is saying, these are not saying these are the guys that wrote this consensus protocol. These are the two people who did the analysis of the protocol. And they do work with Ripple Research. So both Brad and Ethan they work with or work for Ripple in some form. So if we just look up Brad Chase Ripple Labs, we can see his LinkedIn, which LinkedIn will not let me look at them. They want me to prove I'm a human and refuse to, so I can't view it. But you can. I just want to show you it's a real person. There's the link to him. There's some pictures of him. If you go to Ethan McBro, we can actually see him in a ResearchGate website, and definitely works with Ripple Research. So these are two people who are there. It's not like a third party analysis. When you have a third party analysis, it's people who don't have anything to do with any of it. A lot of times they won't even be using it. But in this case, these are people who get paid by the company they are doing the analysis over. And the reason why that's important is because if you're going to convolute or do Basically, if you're going to do anything that converts and try to trick people, these are the ways it's going to get done. This is why we say you shouldn't have trust in a cryptocurrency system, because you end up with stuff like this, where you have people proving what your protocol does, gets paid by you to work for you and to research you, which is why the Bitcoin people get donations. And even those donations from big organizations get looked at with scrutiny, because it's like, if one of the biggest organizations that are utilizing that whatever is paying you, we consider that to be a net negative, not a net positive. So when you come through here, they do the second thing. They just basically explain how the system works. And what they're really saying here is that the UNL is the key point to everything here. That unique ledger of your unique node list. My bad. Unique node list is super important in the consensus protocol, and basically they come down here and they show you. Like here, it was originally believed that roughly 20% of the UNL was a minimum overlap, and then with independent analysis, which we haven't seen, there is no proof of an independent analysis. It's roughly 40% of overlap. So little things like this, where they're claiming to be an independent analysis, or that other analysis has been made, but there's no proof of that. And again, all these analyses are made over a simulated network, not the actual network, or a test net, basically, is another way to describe that. But it's not actually a test net. That's a very different distinction. We can see they talk about the benefits. They talk about how the research is being done, what algorithm is being used to consider research, stuff like the cobalt is used to find overlap, upper bounds, lower bounds, and they can give their percentages because of that other algorithm that they're running to look for things. So when you go to the network model, there's a lot of problems here, especially when it comes to what is honest or correct. And that's where they get like the 80%. If it's 80, if you're not within the 80% tile top, then you're considered incorrect or unhonest. And maybe not specifically those things, but that's how they're looking at it. And it's down to the number of nodes, number of UNLs that actually exist. So the more unique node lists there are, the lower chances of people not agreeing, is basically what we find out through these mathematical situations. We can also see that, like it says here, each node sets to be an 80% of its UNL size, or more exactly, 0.8 per node in your UNL. So if you have like 10, you want to be 8 at least. It needs to be in your UNL. I know this is a bit confusing, but this whole paper is a bit confusing, because they were like, hey, look, your UNL needs to have 80 percentile of per node, but at the same time, your equivalent in that node list needs to be 80 percentile, which is bit confusing, but it does make sense. If you're trying to get people to agree, you need to have the majority power in your specific UNL. And the ideal of that is, if you have 80% power of the people in your UNL, then there will be more UNLs that have less overlap, is the ideal there. So if we go into this graph, which is the newest graph that we're going to see, it explains basically ledgers of the UNL system. So these are, you can see highlighted edges represent the UNL of node. So here's the node, here's its UNL. And then these are the ones it directly talks to. And if you look in this example, it's only directly having influence with 50% of its connections. And in their math, they said you want it to be 80%. So in this example, this is just a bad example to give. I don't think it's probably just an oversight of whoever made this. It should also say, J or B is being spoken to. And they talk about here the broadcasting versus the validating. And they call it a fork safe. And that is because they don't fork. That's all that means. They just set up to where they do not fork. They will rather delete stuff than fork, and that's important. Um, because traditional blockchain database systems, you want to fork so that way you don't lose any data from the non-fork, because the other side of the transactions can eventually become the main chain. Or as we've seen in actual history of blockchains, they can split up and become two separate entities that work in no correlation to each other than their past. They do have atomic broadcastings and stuff like that, and all that really means is that you're talking to another node. You're going from yours directly to theirs, no middleman. You do have clients that can be involved as well as transactions on top of broadcasts. So basically, there can be individual transactions and there can be individual broadcasting. And that's how we have, like, they have X current, X rapid working on top of it that don't actually involve XRP, the cryptocurrency. And I think that's an important distinction that they give in this entire white paper, is that there's probably more value in the ledger than the actual cryptocurrency, because believe it or not, if you go through all these sources I gave you, you'll find out there's more uses of the ledger than there is of the cryptocurrency. And um, that's probably because there is a communication fault in um, the cryptocurrency with consensus algorithm. The consensus algorithm is only mostly used for XRP itself, but it does, I think it was XVIA or XVisa also does use this consensus algorithm, but XCurrent and XRapid does not. They use the trust line system, which can use the protocol, but from all the resources I was able to find, it does not. And keep in mind, almost all resources that I'm finding for Ripple is by Ripple. So that's very unusual for these type of, if it's a decentralized system. Because that just shows that they're centralizing all your data and where your data comes from. So, okay, here we kind of saw this graph earlier, but it looked different. And this is another great way to look at it. So you have your validation be done, you have your preferred branch, and you have your deliberation. So we see all three stages going from right to left, and how they apply can be done differently. So this deliberation is sending out two basic points, L and L, and which one is being accepted is a combination of both L's at the validation stage, but it was on two different branches right after the deliberation. So basically, if I send out a broadcast of transactions, not all my transactions may end up on the same branch, and they might go through different UNFs to be validated, and then put into a validation ring to be combined together, as we see here. Now, I do think this is strange they go right to left instead of left to right, but it is what it is. They talk more about the math, and here's some fun visuals that just shows you the loop that's being done in the consensus algorithm. Because they do talk about here that there are problems with agreements, and in those times that they have these loops that are being done to ensure that everything's being taken care of. And if we even see here, like this update, it's an update of the information, not an update of the chain or the ledger or anything like that. I wanted to point that out because that can be very confusing if you're just looking at that. So how they get a preferred branch is kind of it's a combination of things. It's not just, oh, you pick the branch in your UNL or something like that. Someone can tip to be used as a branch, or it could just be randomly chosen as like in a natural term, or it can be whatever's left over. I think it's the best way to describe that. We see the same kind of visuals again. Now this time it's going left to right instead of right to left. And for the most part of this protocol, that's what we're looking at. We're looking at the fact that uh, the the network is trying to make it to where you won't know where your transactions are being broadcasted through if you're a validator or validator. But at the same time, you can tip that system to ensure it goes a certain way, or someone can tip you to ensure you use their trust line or something like that. And if we look at this system right here, this is a tether. Tether network or tether chain was invented by some other company, and I think there's another name for it now. Nowadays, that they actually have it's a type of sharding or something like that. I can't remember. They keep changing the name of it, but it just basically it's a bunch of small networks inside to make a bigger network is the best way to describe it. And here, when we go through the rounds of deliberation and everything, you have to have some percentages for that data to go onto the next, or for your node or your validator to be considered into the next round of information. And that's really what's important here. So the ideal here is by having these rounds, you're able to remove faults throughout the round system. Now they do here, they're trying to claim that all the transactions make it through, but in the end, there is a set limit of transactions actually made through. And yeah, I think that's pretty much what we're going to view here. If we keep going through, they're going to throw a bunch of math at you, and they're going to repeat themselves quite a bit because they're going to talk about each individual round, which each individual round does basically the same thing, except there are convolutions in here. I didn't point them out specifically in this one, but I did in the previous one. As again, there are ways to determine who is being accepted, who's not being accepted, and they don't even have to know what the transaction is. But in the math, if a, any node or validator that is producing the curated UNL, which means it's ran by Ripple Labs, if there's one per every fourth cluster, then they can keep control over the network. And it's convolutedly spoken about in here. And again, I kind of showed you where it's convolutedly spoken in the original one. They do change up the words in the newer one. I was looking for it, but it had to sit here and actually read it to find it specifically, because it's a very convoluted way of saying it. It's basically saying if you can't be into the accepted party with an X number of tries based on the amount of nodes in your UNLs that are deliberating on the process, then you have to be discarded. And if it's like if you're on a trust line, you have to follow the curated UNL. If you're not on a trust line, you don't, but you may not be a validator. And so that's the real convolution terminology there. And I think it's an important distinction to point out, just because it shows that trust is a major portion of here. But if you read through this, you'll see that they actually talk about the Benzine fault causes problems on its own, plus bad actor, plus also latency. Like if your node is too slow when talking to a node that curates the UNL, or does a curated UNL for everybody, then you can be booted off that UNL or all the UNLs because you're not fast enough. Like there's a minimum speed requirement to try to reduce the Benzite fault system itself. To reduce how many times it faults, they look. So basically, if you can't talk to an official Ripple Labs node fast enough, you could be considered unable to actually validate or be a part of the curated UNL system. And trust lines have to use it. They don't have a choice in it. So I just want to basically end out on a statement and a few questions that I commonly hear and see with XRP specifically. And then I also have like one for XRPL and XRP LCA, the actual consensus algorithm, which in the newest one, I think they changed it to protocol. Yeah, they changed it to protocol. So Ripple has this long history of changing. So the company Ripple has a long history of changing, never staying the same. And from originally being a standard transaction system for banks and institutions to being open coin to now Ripple Labs. XRP has also been modified, at least on the perspective level. But if we just go through the protocol or the consensus, that actually has been changed over the years constantly. It's constantly being changed, modified, adjusted, and it's basically forever changing. Um, and so that does cause problems or confusion in everybody and everything looking at it. So a good way to put that is like at one point in time, um, one of the guys that did this, what was it? I know his name. Um, no, I forgot it. Oh, no, it's over here. David Schwartz has talked about before, stuff like public networks or public chains take a long time to update. It's slower because of all the number of people that handle that stuff. While XRP doesn't have to do that. They can update kind of quickly. And in his terms, it's not a public network. And that's just meaning that it's not going to absolutely everybody all the time. So like you can actually have I think it's like less than 30% of nodes across the entire network running on a previous version compared to the other ones, as long as their consensus algorithm or protocol is comparable, um, which is, I guess, for this type of a system, kind of unique. So if you're running XRapid only or you're running XCurrent only, you guys might not have the exact same um, setup on your node, but they can still be on the same network. What I get from there. So some of the common questions I get is like, is P decentralized? Sure, the token itself is decentralized, but it does not have cryptographic proofs. And all that means is that if you get the XRP, you know, you can be guaranteed basically you're not being given the same XRP. As in, is it actually decentralized amongst everybody? No, a majority holder, just like Doge, there's a majority holder. Um, is XRP a cryptocurrency? No, the coin itself was fully generated like many proof of stake coins and is not reliant on cryptographic proofs to be a currency. So when we say cryptographic proofs to be a currency, we mean that you have to have cryptographic proofs or UTXO to spend your coin. That's not built around that setup where it's the cryptographic proof is your UTXO that's being considered for spending or not spending. Is XRP a digital currency? Absolutely. Is XRPL decentralized? Yes and no. The ledger is described in a decentralized manner, meaning anyone can jump in, at least to watch the ledger. But not everyone can be verified, authorized, or have a say in the ledger being a validator. So there are like various different levels of participation in the ledger that can be done, but not everyone can get those upper tier participation. Also, no, because of the consensus system that trails with the XRPL. With the setup, it is designed in a manner to where there is centralization. So is XRP LCA or LCP now decentralized? No, the consensus model, although it uses bases that are decentralized, like it actually talks about how they use various different systems that are considered decentralized systems, but then those systems were directly modified to remove the decentralized part of it in order to ensure that they can have to ensure that uh, that they can meet agreements. I'm trying to remember the words they actually used. Um, so, like, there was a censorship resilience system that was modified and is no longer censorship resilience, and they even said it's so that way they can create agreements amongst the nodes. So there is a way to force agreements on nodes or force nodes out of the agreement system. Is XRP LCA relying on Ripple Labs? Yes. Although convoluted in speech throughout the entire analysis, there is a list generated by Ripple Labs that is actual validators in the XRPL network. Also, if your latency to one of these Ripple Lab nodes is too big, you are automatically booted from that unique list and many other UNLs, even if it's being held by someone else. So, for example, if the Ripple node you're talking to for XRapid, let's say XRapid specifically, because I did more research on that one, and your ping is too long, well, then you get removed out of the XRapid UNL sets, because those use trust lines, so therefore they have to use that curated UNL list. They don't have a choice. So if you're not in there, you're not in there. You then just become a watcher. So without this list and followings of this, the latency dependencies, you know, basically they will always have control of the chain, and if they don't have that control, it can halt. So people use Binance Smart Chain every day. Tons of people use it, but it is considered a publicly full authoritative chain. And I'm looking at Ripple. It's a authoritative chain. And you notice I didn't say full authoritative. It's an authoritative chain, though. Can XRP be used if Ripple Labs closed? All productions, holdings, validators, etc. today, like right now, if all of the Ripple Lab stuff just disappeared, the foundation disappeared, all of that happened, could it still continue? Yes, but at the same time, it could, for every stage of action it's in halt, would actually increase the difficulty of getting out of halt. This is something that we see with like Nano and a couple other proof of stake chains that are like real big on having centralization control of various different factors. They have this problem where every transaction is risk of halting the entire system. And for every action made after the halt, it makes it more difficult to get out of the halt. There's even in a unique set of math in this consensus protocol analysis that explains how to get out of halt, and it's like you need double the number of uh, validated proofs to get out than what it is in the halt. That can be very difficult. So it's like you get one person that says no, and you're in a halt. You just started back over, and every time you start back over, you need less people to say no, and it's kind of complicated. Binance Smart Chain, because of this issue, they have to restart their chain every 24 to 72 hours. And as the longer it stays alive, the faster they have to do it. Like I think they're doing it 24 hours now every day. They've been doing that every day for like 3 months minimum, because this fault that causes the ability to halt is a problem with proof of stake chains. I have to admit, this isn't specifically an XRP issue. This is a proof of stake issue. So every proof of stake chain has this fault of halt. And they don't call that the Benzine fault, but they don't actually have a unique name to explain the halt. On proof of work chains, we call that a death spiral or a difficulty increase or difficulty bound in. Those are the ones for proof of work that we use that explain the exact same issue. Now, as for like the company and everything around it, well, they follow a pattern of change and they have hide information for a long time. Where, like example, this independent analysis is not an independent analysis. They do things like that all the time. What you actually think about the company is completely up to you, but that is why I showed proofs of the company so you can see who they have at the helm, who they have doing things, how they're trying to mitigate responsibilities and other things, because they have trust. And if you're going to have trust, you got to look at the company as well as currency, the ledger, the protocol, the consensus, and so on and so forth. There are many times when looking for stuff that you'll only find stuff from officially Ripple, even if it's like a third-party site. It will source Ripple as all the information, and it's really difficult to actually come across something that's considered third party where it has Ripple has nothing to do with them. Um, but I did want to end on a note you probably wasn't expecting. Um, a little small tweet thread. I think it's only like 3 or 4 tweets, 5 tweets, from David Joel Schwartz, talking about Flare, which I believe was running on Ripple or the XRPL. My bad, XRPL. So the current Flare holding rules and subsequent airdrops leave absolutely no incentive to not sell your Flare now. You'll lose nothing if you sell now. Well, it's true. You won't get the next airdrops, the secret airdrops. You do not lose them because you can actually sell your Flare for that value they will be getting. And all they have to do is wait for the airdrops. They wrap that coin to get the airdrops, basically. This seems like a very strange decision to me. However, the only way I can explain it is that they simply didn't want to keep their commitment and instead wanted to only give 15% of what they promised. I want to be wrong, but we'll see how I do. I feel bad saying this. I love the project and want the best for it and want to believe the best about it. But my honest opinion is that they leverage XRP community to grow and weaken the promises drastically when they felt they didn't need it anymore. We see a lot of that with Ethereum stuff and EVMs. So that's becoming a more commonality in the crypto space, as unfortunate as that is. And then I wanted on this note right here. That said, that does not make them dishonest or make them a bad project. XRP evolved and didn't keep some promises made in the early days. You can love Flare and XRP too. It's not one or the other, but I don't have happy. Okay, so the last part of that, basically the biggest part to get out of here is Ripple has not been able, well, XRP has not been able to keep all of its promises. And there are promises that are being made constantly by these big corporations, entities, groups, currencies, everything. They're not always going to keep their promises. And that's a good thing to point out because if XRP isn't keeping promises, that shows reason for change. I wanted to point that out because I know everyone watches this is probably going to come at me about some reason why they believe something. But when you sit down, you do the math, and you find out that all Ripple needs is 1 in every 4 clusters to keep complete control over the consensus. Then that means they can keep control of the network. If they can keep control of the network, they can do lots of things, including keeping it speedy, like you see with BSC. It's cheap and fast, but in the result of it, they have to restart their chain quite a bit. So at the end of this, you don't have to believe me or even Joel Kratz. You can believe what you want. It ain't going to change anything. But this is my honest opinion of XRP. It's a digital currency more than anything else. XRPL is the value point that is within their entire Ripple Labs network system, everything. It's XRPL that's more valuable. It has more of the systems built on it. There are systems built on it that don't use XRP at all. And more people rely on those systems that don't rely on XRP at all. And I think that's a very important distinction to make because if you're going to get into XRP, it might be a better idea to get into it because of XRPL. And if there's a way to invest in XRPL, as in with shares or something like that, that actually might be your better option and compared to the cryptocurrency, the XRP itself. Hope you guys really enjoyed this deep dive. This really was deep dive. I could go deeper. We could actually sit here one day and do the math and show the fault points and show 1 every 4th cluster is all they need to keep control of the consensus. But that would depend on your comments. You comment enough right here on the YouTube or on the Twitter or somewhere else that you guys want to hear more about Ripple, I'll do more about Ripple. And if there's a certain coin that you want to hear more about in this similar fashion where I go through it all the way down to the nitty gritty and dig my hands into it as deep as I can, just comment those coins below and we will get on them because I'm here to change your perspective. And if you don't know what your perspective is, then put that currency down there so I can help you it out. Because, unless you do these deep dives, you don't really know what you're getting into. And I thank everybody for showing up, watching this. And if you're watching the replay, thank you so much. Go ahead and hit that subscribe, hit the likes, hit the shares. Enjoy your time and let everybody know what's going on when you change your perspective with 3D.